Hello and welcome to another edition of the GNet TV News Project In Depth. My name is Andrew McKeever. I'm the news director here at GNet TV's News Project. It's my pleasure to be with you today and also to have two special guests in our studio with us today to talk a little bit about the United Counseling Service and that serves Bennington County. With us today are Lorna Matern, who's the executive director of UCS, and also Julie Paglicia, who's the Northshire director of UCS. And ladies, thank you very much for being here and making the time to talk with us about the very important services your agency offers. UCS was formed in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and it is the state agency for community health, community mental health and developmental services in the county. Its programs include the Head Start program, Big Brothers Big Sisters, infant and toddler services, mental health and substance abuse services for both children and adults, and it employs more than 300 people around the county and has a budget of $19 million, so quite a substantial presence here in our area. Just to get us started, Lorna, tell us a little bit about some of these services that UCS offers. I ran through a few of them there, but there's a lot more to the agency than that, I'm sure.
There's quite a bit about the agency. So we work with folks from 0 up to folks who are elderly, providing mental health and substance abuse services to them and their families within the community, within our clinic. In school-based services, we have early childhood mental health programming, working with young people from 0 to 6. And their families, obviously, providing services to the chronically mentally ill as well as developmental disabilities, group home options for those with developmental disabilities who are not able to live on their own. We have a hospital diversion program for people who have psychiatric issues that may be at risk of going to a mental health hospital. Clinic-based services for mental health and substance abuse. Intervention for opiate and heroin addiction. We cover all of Bennington County, including up here in the Northshire, of course, and we provide services to 3,000 clients a year. In addition to those 3,000 that we actually open as clients, we also provide emergency services, education to the community, consultation to child care centers and schools. We're working within the hospital and partnering with the hospital, so we are everywhere.
And also up here in the Northshire, which is something I don't think a lot of folks are aware of. You have a headquarters up here in Manchester, right on Main Street there, and undergoing some renovations right now, as I understand it, as well.
Much needed renovations.
Yes.
Well, great. Well, as you look around the county, what strikes you as the most serious need, or the service that's most in demand that you offer? Is there one thing that stands out, or is that a cluster of different things?
Well, there's definitely a cluster of different things. I mentioned a little bit earlier, of course, the opioid and heroin issue that's happening, and that is often referred to as an epidemic. We certainly have seen it in Bennington and Bennington County. We have an IMAT program, which is a medically assisted treatment program, and working with individuals for treatment in the community that's located in Bennington. And I would say that continues to be a significant issue. Mm-hmm. Not only does it impact, of course, that individual, but it also impacts children and families. So we have young people or older adults who are struggling with the addiction, and as a result, sometimes their children, of course, have experienced trauma. Which is also a particular issue within the community that we're looking at, is how to treat trauma and working with children particularly, but also just because you're a grown-up doesn't mean the trauma in your history doesn't come out. And so we need to be working even more diligently around how do we treat trauma and a history of trauma, and that's certainly another piece of the heroin puzzle, but also beyond that with physical and sexual abuse and neglect within our county as well.
Is that the case up at this end of the county, Julie, as well?
It is. We're working with kids and families through our school-based programs throughout the county, and also working with families, doing some consultations and trainings. We had a couple of our family outreach clinicians go to a trauma academy recently up in Burlington for a graduate program, so that was exciting, and they've been able to share that knowledge with a number of different places throughout the county.
So I'll ask a question that probably I think I already know the answer to. The resources that are available to meet these needs,
Yes.
probably never enough.
Never enough, you're absolutely right. We have absolutely more people who are in need of service than we have the funding to be able to provide the service. And it's kind of a conundrum to be working within a system that we have restricted funding, and we know that there's much more of a significant need. And so we try to prioritize and work with those who are at most need. But I think it gets frustrating sometimes for the community when somebody may need our help, but we just don't have the resources to help them, and we may be able to refer them out to other folks. But it is a struggle to be able to provide the level of care that folks need.
Now, you recently received a rather large federal grant, I think one over $1 million to help boost your Head Start program.
Correct, yeah.
I guess I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that. I mean,
Sure.
because that sounded like you were, I think if I recall correctly, the only agency in New England which received that grant.
So it was
there were about 40 or so across the country, but
Yeah.
you were the winners in the New England area.
Well, we received $1.2 million for an early Head Start grant. The other, actually, there was a Boston area program that also received early Head Start funding. And actually, we just came back from a conference in DC on how to implement the funds, how to be able to follow the federal guidelines, which there are many, of course, and being able to implement our early Head Start programming within our community. And we're partnering with other community child care centers. So they'll be receiving some of the funding through United Counseling Service in order to increase their services to very young children, and also being able to hire some new staff, which is great, and be able to train them in order to be able to work within the early infant care programs within the community and also within Head Start.
So you mentioned hiring new staff. I mean, one of the things I understand about the business you're in is that it's really difficult to find qualified staff, folks who can take on this work. It's difficult,
Right.
it's demanding, and I gather it's not a get-rich-quick scheme either.
No, it's not.
But I understand the legislature is attempting to try and help you a little bit there by raising funds to get more pay for some of your workers.
So there's been some recent legislation to increase our wages to a minimum of $15 an hour. And there's a plan to do it incrementally. So next year we'll have to increase to $14 an hour minimum. And then the following year, I think by 2020, we need to get to $15. And so there's some funds to be able to do that, which will cover about 50% of the cost of that. Because of course, if you raise the minimum up to 14 or 15, then those folks who are now making 14, 15, we have to raise that. So there's some compression planning that we have to do. And so there's some funding that will come in to cover that, and we'll have to find about $1 million or maybe a little bit more to be able to cover the rest. So we're halfway there, which is great. And then the other piece is not only just the salary, but there's also some requirements, of course, for licensure that sometimes make it difficult for folks to come on into this kind of career. So I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to kind of the licensing piece.
I think that trying to find people that have a license can be hard, but we're also willing to work with people who are working toward their license. And so one of the benefits we see for working at the agency is that we provide that supervision that they need, which if they were to get it outside of an agency, any designated agency, it would be quite expensive. So that is something that we can provide to people coming in who want to be in this field.
Well, what's the applicant pool like? I mean, do you have like an actual shortage of people who want to apply for jobs that are opening, or is it the case that when there is an opening, you only have maybe 2 or 3 people that might kind of seem to be in the short list that would qualify? Is it one case or the other?
It's a very shallow pool, the applicant pool. We have competition with New York and Massachusetts as well, who are able to pay a little higher. So if it's between maybe coming and working in Vermont and they're very close to New York, somebody may choose to live in or work in New York. So we have a little bit of competition there. And then of course our other competition is state agencies. So the state of Vermont can pay more and do pay more for very similar work. So we have that competition. And I think depends on the job. You know, we have 24/7 staff because we provide emergency services to the community along with support to folks in group homes and so forth. So certainly it's hard to find third shift folks. We have a requirement to hire third shift people who are licensed, which is almost impossible. And you know, we hire folks who need to do some really hard, important work with individuals on a daily basis, and we're not able to pay them well. So it's a tough sell. Really having to bring people in who are in it absolutely for the work and being able to help other people in their own community rather than for the pay, certainly.
True, and I've noticed recently we're getting more and more people from out of state, people moving here for positions.
That's true.
And depending on the position, I've noticed at least in the North Shire when I'm advertising for school-based clinician positions, I seem to get more for that position. In-home work, I think, is less. I think that may be something that people aren't as familiar with. So we tend to have less applicants for that.
Right. And certainly by the way of recruiting folks on the internet and various other websites, we allow ourselves to be able to open up really to a national search.
Yeah.
So that does provide a bigger, deeper pool. And then once we get them in, we sell them on how great it is to work at UCS.
Well, I was just wondering, you mentioned the heroin opioid thing at the outset of our conversation here. You know, there's been an awful lot of attention paid to that since, I guess, 2013 when Governor Shumlin first made it a centerpiece of his State of the State address that year. Is your sense that we're making any headway on sort of reversing that, or are we still just, you know, seem to be stuck at a very high level, historically speaking, of folks who are kind of trapped in that addiction? Any trends that seem to be emerging around that?
Well, I think one of the things that I find hopeful is that doctors, physicians, and dentists as well are prescribing fewer pills. So in hopes that you know, it lessens the trend at this point. You know, certainly a couple of years ago you may get a prescription for an opioid that's for 30 days, and now trying to be able to prescribe for, you know, 7 days. Learning that for chronic back pain, for instance, what's better for that is not an opioid, but something like yoga and stress management and those kinds of things. So really looking at alternative ways to being able to prescribe for pain or to be able to look at how to treat pain. We've heard story after story about people who become addicted to heroin who, say, was a football player in high school who had an injury, started taking opioids for the pain, and ended up being addicted and going further and further down that road. It's more and more about, well, not more and more about, but certainly those are the folks that are also afflicted, as opposed to what people often see as kind of the traditional drug addict on the street, that it really is your neighbor, it's your friend at school, it's your coworker that's really struggling with this. I'm getting off a little off topic on the trend, but I don't know if I'm the right person to answer the question about whether or not we're making any inroads on the trend. We certainly are responding quickly to the epidemic and providing treatment and making sure that we have places for people to go, because people want treatment. they're struggling and they want to have treatment, and we are providing it as quickly as we can. And I know that we still have, certainly in Bennington County, we still have unserved populations who want treatment and are not able to get it.
Well, I was just wondering, if someone is in the midst of a crisis and they perceive that, okay, I've hit bottom, I got to get help, I can't go on like this anymore, and they think of you, walk us through the process of how that person finds their way to your door, and then what happens after that? Are they sent off to a hospital or to a treatment facility, or is there a consultation process? And I guess also, how does this work up here, Julie? Would it be the same as down in Bennington, or you'd have
Yes.
a consultation with the person first? Is that the way it begins?
Well, we have a universal access program for the entire agency, so all of our referrals come through that way. And then depending on the program that's appropriate, if it's not an immediate crisis, they would be referred to that person for an intake. If it is an immediate crisis, they'd be referred to Battelle House, and they would be assessed there.
Okay. Now, so they would be basically then placed into a facility fairly quickly after that. Is that the idea, or the goal anyway?
Certainly, if there's a person who's presenting as a risk to themselves or others, we would try to have them be placed in a secure setting as soon as possible. And that may be something like the Brattleboro Retreat, who could help provide 24/7 access in crisis stabilization. Or it could be, as Julie referred to, as the Battelle House, which is the hospital diversion program that we have in Bennington. And so they might be in a psychiatric crisis, but not necessarily harmful to others. So they could go to this hospital diversion program, stay within their community, being able to get connected to treatment and be able to be stabilized there. Julie had mentioned the Universal Access Program, and anybody could call the main UCS number. Should I throw it out here?
Absolutely.
802-442-5491, and the North Shire
Is 362-3950.
And you could actually call either one of those and you'll get connected to our Universal Access Program, and depending on what your need is, they'll screen and kind of figure out where we could best provide services to you, and you'll get connected directly to that program. So and if you leave a message, they'll call you back within 24 hours, they'll respond very quickly. It's a great program to make sure that people get connected to the service that they need. Now, if it is an emergency, we do have crisis workers that work 24/7 that can screen you for whether or not it is an emergency that requires a hospital, or can help you get connected to somebody who can help you. We also have specifically crisis workers for a youth-related crisis called the Family Emergency Services Program. And that's Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And they'll go out and see you anywhere. If you're in a crisis at school, at home, police station, it doesn't matter. They'll go out and connect you with folks and do a kind of a crisis intervention if need be.
Okay. All that is weighty, serious stuff. I wondered if we could talk a little bit about the Head Start program that's been around since when, the 1960s. I think it was part of the original Great Society packages of programs. That's a program that enables children who might normally go to like a pre-kindergarten kind of program, or at least go to a school and help them, kind of get up to speed or whatever, what they need to be ready for kindergarten or first and second grade. Is that basically what that does, or am I misunderstanding it somehow?
Well, Head Start is available for folks whose children may be at risk, whatever that means. I mean, it's a very broad term, but there are some financial guidelines as well. Often it may be a single parent home with some limited income, and this provides them an opportunity to have their child go to receive high quality childcare and preschool services when you don't have a lot of money to be able to pay for a high quality program. So it really provides quite an exceptional service to folks in the community who might not otherwise be able to afford high quality care for their child, and can get them ready to enter school and make sure that they're prepared. As you said, get them up to speed and making sure that they have social skills and academic skills and all of those things that their peers have, and so they have equal opportunity to be successful in school.
I was just wondering, do you see like some sort of link between poverty and some of these other social issues? I mean, is it a case where there's one feeds off the other, or is it just a case where, you know, folks of all income levels basically get, you know, have issues or problems that cause them to want to, you know, take advantage of some of your services? I just wondered if there was any connection there that you've seen over the years, or the data might show. Because I've read a certain amount of literature about this, that there seems to be, you know, some kind of, you know, connection, you know, where people who are struggling financially seem to kind of, you know, find their way into needing some additional help. And I guess I just wondered, is that just sort of, you know, random accident, or is there some basis for actually thinking that's the case?
Julie, I don't know if you,
I think yes and no. I think mental illness, you know, doesn't discriminate. I think it's across all socioeconomic lines. But there are some things, I think, with poverty, because of maybe not having money, or living in certain places, or being around certain people with different things going on, that might make them more susceptible to some issues that could make things worse. But not necessarily the mental illness itself. So I would say it's more the environmental, maybe some needs for things like Head Start. Some of our services that we provide, we also have some funding that can help with different things like camp and some other things that kids may not be able to access. So those are ways we can also help.
Okay.
And I think just to throw in the, Julie referred to it a little bit, but food insecurity, housing insecurity. You know, we have families who have experienced chronic homelessness. And so not knowing certainly where you're going to sleep, particularly for young people. So if it's a 3-year-old, let's say, who's living in a family who's homeless and they are couch surfing and they're not quite sure where they're going to live, one of the things that certainly something like Head Start can provide is consistency, structure. You know you're going to get food. There's, you know, we always make sure that there's extra clothes there for kids. There's, you know, laundry there for kids if needed. You know, there's everything that's going to be able to care for them while they're there for all their basic needs. And so when folks live in a situation where their basic needs aren't met, of course, any of those other factors that Julie's talking about, whether it's a substance abuse issue or a family history of trauma, any other kind of mental illness or whatever, are absolutely exacerbated by having all of that insecurity of day-to-day living.
Do you see like a sort of a generational link between trauma and the issues passed down from generation to generation?
Absolutely.
And I guess the follow-up to that is, how do you break out of that? I mean, if you know, a grandparent, let's say, you know, struggled through life, you know, kind of passed some of those issues along to their children, and how does that cycle get broken?
There's the
Is there one magic answer to that, or is it just like everyone's an individual and you have individual solutions for every case?
Well, I think our family approach, our system approach with trauma is helpful. Education is helpful. Working with the child and the parents, working with the family, helping them understand each other. And I think that is one way. I mean, we don't have a secret answer to
That's right.
a magic answer. But I think that those kinds of approaches certainly help, and we're doing more and more of that. And also hearing, you know, in the trauma academy that I mentioned, that is the main focus, is to work with the entire family.
And we do one little steps at a time. Fairly recently, was a young man that we were working with who got his high school diploma, and he was the first one in his family ever to have a high school diploma. Now that's in 2015, that the first person in his family to complete high school, never mind go to college. And so we're helping arm him with a better future by providing him and helping support him. He did the work, but we helped support him to his high school diploma, and we celebrated him, and his family came to a high school graduation that we hosted. And those are the things that we have to do as a community, on a day-to-day basis to help kind of break the cycle and make sure that we are making sure that our young folks have what they need in order to have a different future.
I just wanted just to close up. How does Bennington County compare to the rest of the state in terms of need for all these various services? Are there services that are more in demand here than, let's say, farther north, or less, or are there things that you're doing here that would be different than, let's say, in the needs that might be in, like, say, Chittenden County or someplace like that?
Right. Well, certainly we're much more rural than Chittenden County, so they're taking that into place. So we, they have issues of transportation that makes it difficult for people to access services. We actually have a higher teen pregnancy rate than the state. We have, if we looked at the numbers of people treated for opioid addiction in Bennington County, it's higher than at a rate of 100,000, it's higher than other areas. We have high substance abuse issues here in Bennington. We have a higher suicide rate here. So there's some significant issues that people are struggling with here in the community on a regular basis that are much greater than those in other areas of Vermont. However, I also think that we have a great array of service to help support those individuals. And not, UCS is a great place to work and a great place to get care, absolutely. And we work within a system of care within Bennington County. We can't do our work without collaborating with schools. We can't do our work without collaborating with physicians and private therapists and state agencies that we work very closely with to be able to support our citizens. So I think we have I'm not sure if it's unique in Vermont, but I'm going to say it is, that we really have a great collaborative relationship with other people who provide and support the community here in Bennington County as well.
All right. Well, we could probably talk about a lot of these issues for quite a while longer, but just about out of time now. But I wanted to thank both of you again for being here with us today. Lorna Matern, the Executive Director of UCS, and Julie Paglicia, who is the Northshire Director of UCS. Thank you very much for being with us today and giving us some insights into some of the things that you do and the issues that you're confronting. Really important stuff, and hopefully things will all begin to trend in the right direction.
It's our hope. Thank you.
And thank all of you for being with us today. Hope you've enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again the next time when we return with another edition of In Depth on GNAT TV's News Project. Have a great day.